What's up, everyone? This is Mikel the Entrepreneur, coming back with some more entrepreneurial content. If you are new to my channel and you're thinking about starting, managing, or growing your business or your side hustle, please consider subscribing to my channel. You can do that by hitting that subscribe button, also banging on that notification bell. Today's guest to the podcast is going to be Ron Bibb. He is actually a real estate investor, and he's currently in Texas investing in all types of real estate. I'm just happy that he's actually going to be on this podcast so he can actually share with everyone, his story, everything that's happened with him, and give some advice, man. I know, and if you guys have been following me and you've been, following my content, real estate is probably one of the best ways that you can build passive income. Now, it does take a little bit of money to get started and things like that, but it is something that I'm actually going to be investing in through my entrepreneur journey. So I'm not there yet. I'm actually just waiting to get the capital and just build some of the resources that I need. But the goal is for me to eventually invest in real estate. And Ron has been a really good resource for me. So when I ask questions about it, or even just when it comes to just family, he has 2 young kids of his own. He also has a wife. So balancing all that, I've actually been able to seek guidance from him in many different ways. We're going to get into his interview right after the intro. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. Hey, what? First, man, I just want to thank you for coming on to the podcast. We actually was just talking a little bit off camera about your passion in the world of real estate. And once again, I'm just happy and I'm blessed that you said yes to coming on and just giving game. I think one of the biggest things for me in this podcast is just being able to share information with people that are like-minded and giving inspiration, because I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't know what they want to do. Sometimes they're even just kind of stuck in a rut at a job or whatever it is, and sometimes they just need someone to be in their ear and give them thoughts to say, okay, you can jump out and you can do stuff. So I know real estate, early in my podcast career, as you lack of a better term, I talked a lot about real estate. Obviously, I'm not invested in it yet. I'm planning on getting into it in the near future, but I brought you on because you're the person in my life that knows the most about it. So if I ever had any questions, I would reach out to you.
It's a pleasure, man. I appreciate you having me on your podcast, man, and I'm proud of you for doing your thing. And this is the first podcast I've done, even though I've talked to a lot of people about real estate and I do some mentoring. And so I couldn't, there's not a better place I could be, man. And so I just want you to know that, the grind it's a tough thing. And whether it's real estate or social media or any traditional brick and mortar business or whatever the vehicle is, it's difficult, and you need support. You need people who've been through both failures and successes. And so you just say the word and I'm here. So
real estate, man, obviously it's a scary topic for most. So what made you jump into it? What made you get into it?
Well, it's funny because coming up, for me the path was the same. The traditional go to school and go to college and go get into corporate world and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how I started. Really, I kind of fell into it when I came from California, Southern California, and a friend of mine gave me a book to read about investing in real estate. And it's all well and good, but you're talking about San Diego, man. I'm in my early 20s, mid 20s, and a lot of that stuff is it was looked to be unrealistic with those prices. So when I moved here to Texas, looking at the price differences, I got into the corporate world. I finished my bachelor's degree in San Diego, and then came out here.
Good job.
And and so I became I got into the insurance industry, and became a manager. And anyway, one of the things that I started to notice was the price differences, and it was really just looking at, hey, this costs that, but I can rent it for this, and there's a gap there, and I get to keep it. And so that's kind of how it was. And so I picked up a couple of books, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is the one that most people are going to point to, and then believe it or not, Real Estate Investing for Dummies. That was the one that took it from the concepts of Rich Dad Poor Dad to actionable A, B, and C, D, and this is what you do.
Correct.
So
because he didn't say a lot. A lot of people don't know. Me and my dad talk about it. He says nothing
Right.
about what he's doing in that book. He just gives you the
Exactly.
overall theory, kind of a thing.
His book is more for mind state. It's a set the table for the things that are to come. And so real estate investing for dummies is the one that gave me a lot more actionable things to do. And so I didn't know a ton. My first investment properties is a Ford package deal at Cedar Hill. I have half duplexes. I had never even heard of Cedar Hill, let alone been to Cedar Hill. All I know is that they cost, I get down to numbers. It costs, I think it was, if I can recall, it's been 14 years. They wanted 315, and I ended up something like that. And I ended up getting it under contract for like 291. At any rate, when I was doing the math, did the contract sight unseen. I had never even been to Cedar Hill. But then you build in the option periods. So you got like 7 days to do inspections and do walkthroughs. And so, all I knew was that the mortgage payment was at something like 2 grand a month. And then the rents were totaled up to about 3 grand a month. And so I just knew that that was good. I didn't even know what return on investment was at that time. And so I got him under contract and went down there, did the inspections and did the walkthroughs and all of that. And then I was off to the races. But so to answer your question, it was more of a kind of falling into it kind of thing, as opposed to saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And that's how it started. It originally wasn't even intended to be what it's blown up to be now. It was originally intended for me to be in the corporate world. I got into management and insurance company at that point in time, and then to do this part time as like a supplement to my income. I didn't understand the power of real estate, and I've been in it for 14 years this month. It was March of
Congratulations.
2007 when we got started.
Congratulations.
Appreciate it, man. It's been a journey. You see all this gray hair.
Yeah.
It's been a journey.
Yeah.
But I didn't even really begin to know what I was doing the way I know it now until 2015, when I left the corporate world and I was doing this full time, and I had more time to actually study the craft. It just so happens I was doing it right. Like I said, I didn't even know what return on investment was until I was, 5, 6, 7 years in the game. And it just so happens that I was getting really high returns on investment. And at that time, you're talking about 2007. So you're talking about the Great Recession. And it was at that point in time, it was relatively easy. If you, as far as like the inventory, you could pretty much, there was a website that had listings of investment property, and you could pretty much close your eyes and point to the screen, and that whatever address you landed on, the numbers worked. So I was fortunate in that regard. And now as I've gone through it, I actually know what I'm doing. So I can mentor and teach people and walk them through it. So I kind of backed into it and grew into what things are now.
That's crazy. So like your first property, you actually had a good ROI on that.
Oh
So
yeah.
so then
Oh yeah.
what happened? Because you said you didn't really, you knew it was right, but you didn't know like this is great what I'm doing.
Right.
So how did you
Right.
learn like the scalability, and like how did it turn into the business, and like why did you decide to go full throttle? Because I think you said that you were still in the corporate world, right, when you first started.
Right.
So
Oh yeah.
when
Oh
did
yeah.
that transition happen? Like when did you go full time and
It,
why?
well, it was slow. This particular business, you know, it takes a long time for it to develop, and so much so that even with some of the numbers I was doing, you're talking, my first deal was the cash on cash return was in the 30%. Even with that, it took a long time before you even know that it's really, really working. And it's a snowballing effect, and eventually it gets big enough to where you can recognize it if you don't initially know, like I know now. And the snowball gets bigger, and then as it continues to snowball, the speed with which it snowballs also increases, so the velocity increases. And so I would I would do my day job, and then I would go down to Cedar Hill and paint houses all night till midnight, come back home, get up and do it all again the next day. I had that 20-year-old energy, that mid 20s energy. I don't
Yeah,
have the same energy now, but
yeah.
um, at any rate, so it really just was trial and error. I learned as I went. I ended up I found out about hard money lending through happenstance. I had a deal under contract, and the bank, we went and did the appraisal, and the bank, the condition wasn't one that the bank was willing to lend in. So I had to get busy trying to figure out how to save the deal down a hard money lender. So then I learned how to, instead of doing 20% down, I learned how to do 10% down, and I learned how to do 0% down if you structure the deal right, which is not all that common, but you can do it. But so it was as I went that I learned how to optimize the business. Then I eventually started doing wholesale deals and things like that. And so even up until 2015, which is when I retired from the corporate world, I still had an idea of keeping my job and then just doing it on the side. But I realized that that was kind of like a ceiling that I was hitting in the corporate world, where in order to go any further, I would have to become somebody who I wasn't. I wasn't comfortable with it. I didn't really fit in. I'm not really one to be told what to do, just in general. And so it was at that time that I said, you know what, I'm done with this. Let me see. This real estate thing is taking me places that I never envisioned. So let me see where I can take it. At that point in time, I had when I left, I had 19 units. And funny enough is that I spent all these time building the business, but I never really paid attention to the management part because we renovate, hopefully, because hopefully I bought something at wholesale that needs a little work. We fix it up and then we put a tenant in it and I manage it. But because I had a good job, really I didn't pay as much attention to the management part as I did to just the acquisition. So as long as I was bringing enough money in to continue buying, that's all I really cared about. So after doing that for years and years, when I left my job, I turned around with 19 rental properties bought correctly, and I could barely pay my bills because I had so many bad tenants. So so I immediately started, and I had one lady with me for 10 years and never raised her rent. I just didn't focus on the management part. So when I left, I immediately started. I put a plan together, a little mini business plan on how to get it from where it was to where it needed to be, and I just started putting tenants out and renovating, putting tenants out. I was at the courthouse probably the first year, probably like 6 or 7 times, evicting, fixing them up myself. I learned watching YouTube videos how to put floors in and stuff like that, and I would go do that. And now I do it all the time. And then I would raise the rents and just keep going. It took about 3 years to get it to where it was really right. And that's pretty much how it happened. And at this point in time, it snowballed to the point where there really is no reason for me to go back to work. So,
Yeah, the income that you're making. That's crazy, man. You were like,
yeah,
you were talking about the acquisition and like the operation. And
yeah,
I'm in that stage right now too, man, where I'm building my business, and I know that the time is gonna come where, in order for me to actually plant and nurture my seed correctly, I'm gonna have to leave the corporate world in a nine to
right,
five, man, in order to see it.
right.
Yeah,
I was gonna say that it's like a double. It's like the 9 to 5 is one of the things that helps sustain you while you're building it, but you can never really maximize it unless all your efforts are put into it. So there comes a tipping point where you've gone as far as you can go part time, and now you got to throw yourself in it, and now you got to master what you're doing. And for me, the benefits, I've gotten so many properties because I could pick up, I see a listing, I could pick up right then and there and go down and look at it and be the first one to put an offer in. I had a wholesale deal in Mansfield. Um, they wanted, if I can recall correctly, they wanted 195 for it or something like that. I told them I was only willing to pay 185 for it. And so I let it go at that. And then about a week or two later, the guy calls me up and says, "Hey, will you take 187?" And so I said, "Of course." Now I happened to be on my way to Arlington to check on a make ready that my maintenance guy was doing, and so I just took a little turn. Instead of a left, I took a right. I took a left and went on to Mansfield, and I had the earnest money right then and there because those deals are usually first come first serve. So if I was stuck at my desk at 95 and I'd be like, okay, I'll be there at 6 o'clock when I get off work, it would been gone. And so I gave him the money and we was off to the races. And you're talking about a deal that I put like 20 grand into fixing it up. So I bought it for 187, put about 20,000 into fixing it up. After all said and done, it's worth at that time 245 or 240,
cushion.
and I'm only into it. Yeah, I'm only into it for about after refinance costs and stuff like that. I'm into it for about 210, and then the cash flow every month. My mortgage payment is somewhere in the cash flow is a little over $1,000 a month on 500 each side. It's a duplex, and you're talking about a cash on cash return in the 40% range, all because I had the time to go do it because I wasn't stuck to a desk.
Yeah.
So
Well, so thinking about that, like I know a lot of the people that watch or a lot of the people that consume my content are people that are working in the 9 to 5 sector, and then they have their side hustles. So like, what is a criteria that you think that is appropriate? I know everyone like does it to their own. Like you had your own reasons for leaving, but like if you had to
Right.
give some advice to someone, like okay, it's time for you to actually go full throttle and invest. Like what do you think someone should think about before they leave their 9 to 5? Is it cash flow? Like what is it like that you think that they should think about?
If once you get to the point where the income that you're bringing in can sustain you, and I hate to say to a comfortable level because nothing is really comfortable. If you're comfortable as an entrepreneur, you got problems. You're not growing. So, if you get to the point where you can at least sustain yourself, and you've proven that your side hustle is more, it can't has the potential to be more than a side hustle. There's a bigger market for it, and all you're missing is the time. And you've proved the concept to the point where you're bringing enough money to sustain yourself. Then at that point, now you're at a crossroads. You have to make a decision, because it's a perfectly. You have a lot of people on YouTube or a lot of these videos, and they'll piss on 9 to 5 jobs and all of this and that, and that's crap. Not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur. It's perfectly valid to keep a 9 to 5 and have a side hustle so that you're not, when if and when you get laid off, you're not asked out like a lot of people are. So that's okay. So you get to that crossroads where you go either way. Now you need to determine, one, that you're sure that you want to go this way, because and anybody who's built a side hustle knows, that there's a ton of landmines, there's a ton of setbacks and unpredictability and things like that. And make sure that your why, the reason why you're doing it, is strong enough to overcome those things. And then once you make that decision, you go for it. The worst thing you can do is fail. So, and I failed. I could tell you a story. I've never failed as far as real estate, but I've done other things that I failed in spectacular fashion. So,
Yeah, well, share, man. That's what it's about. I mean,
oh
I think
yeah.
we learned through
So
it. What happened?
okay, well, so yeah, so like I told you, this thing moves slow, and I didn't have enough education to understand where I was at in the process. So I'm looking at it in 2010, I got laid off from my job, got a severance, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm good at this real estate thing. Let me try buying businesses, and it's probably just like real estate. You buy a business, you put a manager, and you let it run. Well, it doesn't work that way. So I bought a couple of things. I bought a transmission shop. I bought a couple of hair salons. I didn't know nothing about none of that stuff. And I'll make the story short. I should have put that money into real estate, what I know, but I didn't, and I ended up losing all three, getting sued for. We were going out of business in the transmission shop, and I had a car that we had finished. The manager of the shop takes the car, goes off of 35 off of 35 Northwest Highway, picks his girlfriend up. He gets back on the freeway, gets into an accident. She's thrown out of the window and killed. And her parents sue. At first, they sued the business, but I didn't really care about that because I was going out of business. And I didn't, but since I was going out of business, I didn't have no insurance. That's why they sued the business, because they wanted insurance. And once they figured that out, then they sued me personally.
Yeah.
And so for $1 million. And at that time, all my real estate was in my
Ooh,
personal name.
ooh, ooh.
Yeah. So ended up having to fight the lawsuit. Thankfully,
Yeah.
I got out of it. And then immediately moved everything to an LLC.
Very
At any
smart.
rate,
Very smart.
yeah. So I learned my lesson, and now I have insurance is the major. I got $1 million life insurance policy. I got umbrella policies. I got $1 million liability over the business. And now I know. At first, I was that guy that never gets sued, but yes, you're gonna get sued. What the lawyer did is he probably looked up. He said he saw all the real estate I have my name, and he said, well, we're gonna sue you. So at any rate, so yeah, I have failed in those. I failed in businesses, and I'm telling you, it's a dark and lonely thing, but you come back from it, especially when you do. If you're gonna fail young. I was 31, 32 when all this happened, and I was able to bounce back, and so so. But again, that's where your why comes into, and your reason for doing what you're doing. And money is not a good enough reason, and most people will tell you that. So once you get to that crossroads, then you take inventory of what's important to you and where you see yourself in the end. and then go with whatever path lines up with that. That's what I tell people. You always start with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. Are you looking to supplement a 401k and a retirement, and you're okay with what you do, and want a comfortable retirement, or do you want to be economically independent? And why do you want to be independent? What's your plan for your kids, and beyond, and leaving a legacy, and then let those the answer to those questions guide you. It's not a given that you have to be a full-time
So
entrepreneur.
what is your with that said? Like, what drives you? What's your passion? Your kids? 'Cause I know you got young babies and your wife. Like, what is it?
Yeah,
What
I
is it?
got it's my family, and beyond it. I want to set up. I want to be the beginning of a legacy of wealth, not just for the wealth itself, but for the power and influence that can come along with it, so that could be used for things that are positive. So this is what I'm doing. I'm fortunate to where I'm economically free right now, but my goal is not for me. It's for I want to put my kids in the 1%, so that hopefully that they move the needle forward when my time is up, and it's about them, until where they become, or either them or their kids become a family of influence. And I always tell people that this is how I put it. Donald Trump has a his son. His name is Barron Trump, and he's probably around 10 or 11 or so. And so you got a 10 or 11-year old. Eventually, and then he's a metaphor, obviously, but eventually their paths are going to collide at some point. You now, what I'm doing now is determine what I'm doing now. The point of it is that when they do, I don't want it to be where my daughter is interviewing for a job from Barron Trump. I want it to be where she's in a room, maybe trying to partner with them, or maybe trying to, stuff like that. So if the collision is unavoidable. What I'm doing now will determine what goes on in that meeting, and so that's my why, and that's
That's
how
like
I put
that's
it.
another way of just explaining generational wealth. I think that's if if we had to,
Exactly.
obviously, like, you wrote it differently than I would. Like, if I'm writing a test,
Right.
but yeah, man, I think my biggest
Right.
motivation too is my family, man. Like, for the same reasons. I
Yep.
couldn't say it any better, man. Just
Exactly.
I don't want,
Exactly.
and this is my how I see it. I don't want it to be where the struggles that I've gone through, like me being homeless with my wife, or us struggling, to get a
Right.
dollar sandwich at the store, or whatever it is, man. I don't want my
Right.
kid. I don't want them to have to go through that again and start all over with their generation. I want to be able to build
Right.
on that, not only with
Exactly. Exactly.
finances, but I also want that to be opportunities as well. Like you said, I mean, at the end of the day, you're right.
Exactly.
The collision is going to happen, but what
It's
side of
gonna
the
happen.
table do you want, your kids or your
Exactly.
offspring, or the generations after you? Like, where do you want them to be at? Do you want them to still be working for those big
Exactly.
corporations, or do you want them to, like you said, be partnering or innovating with those companies, man? So,
Exactly.
and I think that's
Yeah.
a lot of people. I don't want to speak for a lot of people, but I do know through the feedback that I get, there's a lot of people that think the same way, man. Like, I want my kids to have the
Right.
opportunity to be able to. This is what I think about too. Like, when I'm driving down the street, I see someone in a Mercedes Benz. It's like, I should be able to have that.
Yeah.
I see somebody in a nice house. It's
Right.
like, I
Right.
deserve that.
Right.
Like, why do my kids not ever get to drive every day in a luxury car? Or why can't they live in a house
Exactly.
where they have room to do what they want to do? Or why can't they play sports? So
Exactly. Exactly. And that goes down to my state, because everybody, at least every black person I know is heard this the phrase "money don't grow on trees." We get told that by probably our mom or our dad, or whatever. And so that's always been the thing: money doesn't grow on trees. Money doesn't grow on trees. Well, what if you planted a money tree? So it's just mind state, that the one being a poverty mind state, or a scarcity mind state, and another being an abundant mind state. And don't get me wrong, we can be as positive and throw out all the sayings that we want to. There generate the racial wealth gap is a very real thing. It is an uphill battle. It is very difficult. You can do everything right and still fail. So I'm not saying that just having abundant mind state or a positive mind state is good enough. It's not even close. It's just the beginning, but you can't do it without it. I can
correct.
tell you
I mean,
that
and
much.
and also one thing I talked to my wife about too is the level of influence. Like her and I have the most influence on our children. So we have to make sure we give them the right, like,
Right.
and this is what my dad taught me too. He was like, even my Uncle Mike, they would never say like, I can't make you change the environment that you end up being in, but I can help you in that environment. I can give you the tools to
Right.
influence you to make good decisions, because I can, smoking weed, all those different things, you're gonna be around it, you're gonna see it. I would be,
Right.
I can't just block you from getting all of those bad and negative situations. But what
Right.
I can do is give you the guidance to say, hey, when you do get $1,000, this is how you should invest it. If you want to start a
Exactly.
business, this is how you can do it. Just all these different things, man.
Exactly.
And it's but the I when it comes to mindset, because actually one of the first, I think it was the first episode on this podcast, I talked about, is poor being a mindset, or is it like a status? And how do you feel about that? Do you feel like it is both? Or do you feel like it's just one?
I think it. Yeah, I think it's both. I think you'll have factions on both sides, and a lot of times we hear from, especially from Black folks who have quote made it or whatever the case may be, is they'll go into the whole it's just a mind state thing, and I think that does a disservice to you can't have 400 plus years of free labor, give another group of people 400, and I always bring it back to the difference between us and them, or however you want to put it, but you can't because we disproportionately represent uh, you know we're represented as far as the poverty line goes, but you can't give that much of a head start, and then develop institutions that bar you from building wealth, the redlining, where people are able to build generations of wealth and stuff like this, and then you're held back, and then turn loose and say, hey, go ahead and compete, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but you ain't got no boots. And so those things, I'm speaking specifically about the plight of our community, but it is also transferable to anybody, whether they be black or white, who is in a state of poverty. It does take money to make money. It does take connections. It is the reason why we're behind is because when we get laid off, we don't know anybody who can make a hiring decision like that the same way they do, and so they bounce back quicker. So the point is that there are resources that you need to have in order to pull yourself out of poverty. The way I got started was I took on a partner in my mother who happened to own a home in California, in San Diego, and kept it. That's all she did. She kept it but a lot of people sell, and a lot of people. So she owned it from the time I was 2 or 3, and then as a 27-year-old, there was some equity in it. So she pulled out a little bit of money and we bought a property. Now, what if that wasn't there? You see what I'm saying? And so I think it's both a mind state and a condition. And so that's kind of where I
It's
land on it.
crazy, man. Like it's crazy. Did your mom like go into that buying a house thinking like, okay, one day I'll get equity, or she's like, I just want to provide for my kid? I mean, obviously, I can't. You probably can't answer that because it's in her brain. I don't know if you guys had the conversation, but if you guys did, like, what was her mindset?
Um, the my biological father, they were married at the time. They divorced when I was 5. He was in the army, so he had the GA. What do they call it?
GI Bill,
The
something like that.
uh, GI, something like that. And they ended up getting that house. And so, as far as thinking into the future, I don't think that that's what it was, because I she's the things that she's learned have been because we've been in partnership, and I've kind of brought her along the way as I've learned. So I'm pretty comfortable in saying that it wasn't the thinking 30, 40 years down the line. She was just trying to keep a roof over me and my brother's head when they got divorced, and he was trying to make her sell it so that she could get that he'd get his whatever back, whatever they get, the military for to buy a house. And she's just trying to keep a roof over two boys' head. And so, it just, but a lot of people don't have that same circumstance, and then kind of draw it together, and then they don't have the mind state, right? So I have a friend of mine who um, had a mother who owned a house, and she could have tried to do the same thing, pull money out and go into business, but she didn't want to do that. She sold the house and went and bought another house, and an opportunity was lost. And it's a combination. If her mind state was different, then maybe the outcome would have been different, and it would have said, instead of selling his house, let's pull money out of it and then do the
There you go.
same thing.
So my next question kind of goes off
So
of that. So obviously you said it takes money to make money, which is something that is a very true statement.
mhm,
So for someone, obviously, like your circumstances were different. Your mom had a house, you were able to pull out equity. But for someone
right,
that's starting a
right,
business, like obviously when it comes to real estate, you deal a lot with venture capitalists, you deal a lot with angel investors, like not
right,
businesses, but banks and things like that. So what will be your advice of someone if they
right.
want to capitalize their business, they want to bring capital in and raise funds to start their business? Like what are some ideas that you have for that?
Well, it does take money to make money, but the good thing about that is it doesn't take your money necessarily. And so, what I would say, there, partnering is an awesome way to accomplish those goals. You find somebody who has what you don't bring to the table, and you have what they don't bring to the table, and you put it together. And that's what we did. And from that one investment, it was able to snowball it into what it is today. So that's what I would say. If you've got the know-how and the hustle and stuff like that, there's plenty of people out there who aren't happy with the return they're getting on their 401k or retirement or whatever the case may be, and it doesn't take a ton, to start, but they will be willing to invest. And then as you show them that you're that you have a business plan and that it's viable and there's a market for whatever your product or service is, as you grow, it'll attract money. And so that's what I would say, is that you know I, because when I figured out how to buy real estate the most optimal way that I know how. I was buying real estate when I lost those businesses, and I didn't go into all the other detail, but I was in so much debt, and because I had the rental properties in my name, I couldn't file bankruptcy. So I asked the lawyer. I had a bunch of credit cards and all this and that, credit card debt that I had as a result of the business. I asked him, I'm like, well, what do I do? I can't file bankruptcy because I'll lose. They'll make me sell the rentals. He's like, don't do anything. Just let him sue you. And he said it's gonna wreck your credit, but the ones that are suing you, you'll fight them and you'll either settle or win or whatever the case may be. And that's what I did. And I was getting sued. Every month I had somebody knocking at the door, and some of them I won, some of them I settled and stuff like this. But it wrecked my credit. And at that point in time, I had 13 rentals, and I went from 13. My credit's better now, but during the time that it was bad, I went from probably 13 to 24 rentals because I learned how to buy without credit. So I did wraparound mortgages where I had one that I bought off of Craigslist that actually own three duplexes on that street now. Just bought one in October,
Congratulations, man.
and
Really?
he was selling. I'm just doing it, and this was an off-market deal. Long story, but so it was a duplex he was selling for 99,000. He only wanted 10% down, and he was going to do a wrap mortgage. He didn't even check my credit. And so I bought the property. He had him severely under rented. Funny thing is, he's told me, he said, I got a good property management company. If you and I can give you the contact when we close. And I said to myself, no, you don't. You just think you got a good property management company. It was renting one side for 510 and one or 525, and the other side for 550. When I took over, the lady who was paying 525. She was under lease. I bought this in October, and then she was under lease until May of next year. She could barely afford the 525, so I negotiated to let her out of her lease, and I immediately rented that one
Wow.
for 800, like immediately. And then the other side, I ended up having to evict her, and then I rented that one for 850
So he just didn't
immediately.
even know
And
what he was
so
sitting on.
he didn't know what he didn't know. He didn't have no clue. And the cash return on investment on that one was like in the
Wow.
60s. And because I only had to put 10% down, and so after closing costs and everything, I was into it for like
Yeah.
12,000.
Yeah. That's
That's
it.
it. And so, and this was in 2014, and the one I just bought in October is exact same layout, and it's worth 199. And the one the next to it, I own that one. That I bought that for 62. 62,500 in 2014. So and now it's worth
There you go.
199.
There you go.
So and yeah, and so even with this last one, I had owned the duplex next to it, and for years I'd been saying if I could buy this place, I would love to, because the people who own it, they don't know what they're doing, so they're just putting they're renting rooms, and you get the kind
You
of
don't
tenants that
want.
you usually get when
Yeah,
you're renting
you don't
rooms.
want
Yeah,
that.
right, exactly. So so I was turning over the unit right next door to it because they left because of the next door neighbors, and I happened to talk to the son of the lady who owned it, and she was getting burned out and she just didn't want to do it anymore. So I called her up and I made her offer and bought the place from her, and got one of them out. I'm evicting the other one, and I'm turning around put good tenants in there, and no
That's
more
crazy, man.
problems.
So now, so I'm going way back in our conversation. So with that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I'm all over the
you're
place. So
good, man.
yeah,
You're
just
good. I think
yeah,
most entrepreneurs, we are all over the place. But so now you're able to
yeah.
catch those things. You're able to see those deals because you're doing it full time. So, and I was just talking to a friend
Right.
of mine. He was talking about just experience and how just making those
Yeah,
mistakes and doing the grind, you start to like just recognize good deals and recognize what's good for you, and then opportunities start to come
exactly.
your way. So my
Right.
next question for you, man, is if someone is trying to, especially like with operations, I think operations is a big thing. So if someone, let's say they're lacking in taking their business to the next level in whatever way, like what advice would you give them? If let's say you had a business partner or you want to bring in a business partner, like how would they find that? How would they solicit someone to come help them? Because I know that you said that's a big thing, like having help, finding a partner, partnering up with
Yeah.
someone. Like how would you do that?
Yeah. Well, it depends on whatever industry you're in. So let's just say you're an insurance agent and you're building an agency, or a realtor and you're trying to build a business, and you're looking to partner. Well, join this whatever association corresponds with whatever your profession is. Network, go to those events. With as far as real estate, they have all kind of real estate investment groups, Facebook groups, and all of that. Meetups. They meet every so often, every week or whatever the case may be. Go, bring your business cards, start talking to people. And when I do that, back before COVID, I'm passing out business cards, and I'm not even the biggest networker out there. It's just not my thing. But sometimes you just naturally do it, and I get people calling me up on wholesale deals all the time just because of that. And now they're always crappy for the most part, but that's the way it's gonna be. And the one out of 100 will be good. But anyway, and so yeah, so I would just say get out there and start making connections, and then eventually you're gonna run into somebody who's got a problem that you can solve, and you got a problem that they can solve, and you're like minded, and then you can partner up. And so it's not going to happen unless you get out there and get involved with the people who are in that profession.
So this is one of the questions that I ask all of my entrepreneur guests. But so if you were having a conversation with a 2 minute conversation with someone that was thinking about starting their business, starting their side hustle, what advice would you give them in that 2 minutes?
The first thing I would say is, again, going back to what is the reason behind it, what's the why, and what's your end goal, and work your way backward. That's the best advice. To me, that's the best advice you can give anybody in entrepreneurship. Figure out what your end is, and work back, and take your steps backwards, and so that way you can get there, because it's like a roadmap. If you don't do that, how do you know where you're going? So that's what I would say with that. And then anything beyond that would be something specific to what it is they're trying to do. Um, um, Specifically for real estate, I would tell them to get an idea, and a little bit of education on what area of real estate that they want to go into. Start with educating yourself, a couple of books, and then once you figure out what direction you want to go into, find somebody who's doing that and take them to lunch or take them for coffee or whatever the case may be. You'll be surprised. A lot of people don't like giving too much free game, and one of the reasons being is because when you give stuff away, people don't value it. So when you give your time away, for free, a lot of times people just don't value it. They'll cancel on you. They'll do this or that, but and stuff. But there's a lot of folks who are proud of the things that they've accomplished, and they'd be more than happy to share it with you. You buy them lunch or buy them coffee and sit down with them, and I do it all the time. I'll sit down, I'll talk your ear off, and so find somebody who's doing what you want to do and is where you want to end up, and take them to lunch and pick their brain, get an idea of kind of what the road they've gone down, the landmines that are there, and how to navigate those landmines. Because really, that's what this all boils down to is being trying to get from point A to point C, and all the steps in between. If you don't know what point A and point Z is, then how are you going to do it? So before you do anything, that would be my biggest advice. Figure out where you want to be, and work your way backwards, and find somebody who's there, and pick their brain.
Reverse engineering, man, at its finest.
Exactly.
There's a quote, man. I don't remember where I got it from, but it said, "Goals are the architects of the imagination," and that's kind of what
Right.
I started to envision when you said that. Like, for instance, let's give an example. I want to have a family vacation every year. That's like the goal that I
Right.
want to have. So then you, like you said, start reverse engineering. How can you do that? How can you do that
Exactly.
long goals wise, and then how can you do
Right.
that short term and soft goal wise? Save a little bit of
Right.
money here or whatever. Like however you want to do it, but. Man, that's really some insightful information, man. Because one thing that I do value over education is also, like you said, experience mentorships, because you're getting that hands-on information that you spoke about earlier. You're
Right.
finding out about real life stuff that people can share with you and help you with. So,
Right.
man, I appreciate our conversation, man. It was some
Yeah,
good
man.
stuff.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. Anytime, if if you find that your audience could value from or find value in just whether it's specific to real estate or just economic principles, that they transcend real estate, but they're most applicable with real estate. There's a lot of things that people just don't understand about the way money works, and if they did, they wouldn't do half the stuff that they do. So any help that I can be, if you just let me know, and I'll be there, man. It's really good to see you doing your thing, man. And I love to see young. I feel like an old man saying this. I love to see young black men doing their thing. So I'll be 41 this month. So
Hey, man,
so
that's 40 years young, man.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
man, I appreciate it, man. And like I said earlier, like you've actually definitely guided me through conversations that we've had and through everything. So with that said, how can people find you? So people want to connect with you, or they're willing to sell you some property, or they want
yeah.
to find out more information. How can they get in contact with you? Where can they
Yeah,
find
man.
you? What's your
They,
contact list?
they can. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't really have a big social media presence. I'm not really, I just not my thing. But I'm definitely on LinkedIn. You can email me at ronaldj48@msn.com, and that's about where. I mean, that's about where it ends with me. So,
No, you're all good, man. You're all good,
yeah,
because I know there's gonna be people out there that definitely there was some buzzing words like, okay, I want to learn more about that because I'm
yeah.
thinking about getting into real estate. So,
Oh yeah.
and you are
Okay.
definitely a beacon for information, man, because you've been doing it for, you said 14, 15 years now.
It'd
So,
be 14 years, 38 rental properties, and there's in what I do, I can assure you that any of these folks, lifestyle limited, bigger pockets, all this and that, I know everything they know. So
there you go, man. You're doing your
yeah,
thing. Thank you, Ron, man. I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate it,
I
man.
appreciate you for coming on,
Thank you.
man.
You take it
All right.
easy.
Let's talk. Let's talk business.